when the apocalyptic rainstorm struck. Thanks to a prophetic dream, I had hoarded enough supplies. Laying back in my 18th floor luxury apartment, watching the chaos of humanity unfold. It was a scorching July. Pedestrians on the street were rushing by, dripping with sweat. The outdoor temperature had already reached 41 degrees Celsius. Working around the clock had taken its toll on me, and I fainted in the office due to low blood sugar. In my days, I seemed to have a dream. In the dream, a catastrophic rainstorm poured down for nearly 2 months. Through the haze, I heard overlapping voices echoing in my ears. Opening my eyes, I was still disoriented, unsure of what had just happened. Hui, you're finally awake. You scared us to death. Tell me about it. You were perfectly fine. How did you suddenly pass out? Are you still feeling sick? Look at you, Hui. Maybe we should take you to the hospital. The scenes flashing through my mind felt too real. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was July 18th, 2052, 11:15 a.m. Until the catastrophic rainstorm from my dream, I had less than 12 hours left. At that thought, I couldn't help but stand up. Oui, you should really lie down and rest a bit more. Don't faint again. I could only make an excuse to my concerned colleagues, Sister Wang and Brother Dao. I'm still a little dizzy. I think I'll head to the hospital for a proper checkup. Once downstairs, I made a call to my property management. Under the guise of opening a convenience store, I rented the storefront closest to the parking garage. Then, I drove straight to a wholesale supermarket. Walking in, I bypassed the aisles and found the sales manager. As an orphan, through my own relentless hard work, I had recently bought my first luxury apartment. It was located in a remote suburb. It used to be an unfinished, abandoned housing project, until the government took over last year and slowly began selling units. The buyers were mostly wealthy people leaving it vacant, or real estate flippers. The current occupancy rate was incredibly low, given the remote location of the complex. My excuse of opening a local grocery store worked perfectly. I ordered a massive stockpile of rice and noodles, bottled water, toilet papier, towels, sanitary pads, and various other daily necessities. The purchasing manager was beaming with joy. He gave me a killer discount, and even threw in free delivery. He probably hoped for a long-term partnership. By the time this was sorted, it was already 3 p.m. I hurried over to a pharmacy, stocking up on common medications, along with a pile of vitamins. Next, I visited an outdoor survival store to buy life buoys, an inflatable boat, and more. On my way, I grabbed power banks, rechargeable lamps, batteries, and backup equipment. Anticipating a power grid failure, several alcohol stoves, and fuel supplies. That dream was too vivid, too horrifyingly real. Only by hoarding as much as possible could I find any peace of mind. Seeing that it was already 5 p.m., I casually bought a piece of bread to fill my empty stomach. Just as I was about to head home, I received a call from the supermarket. They informed me the delivery trucks had arrived at my complex. I was still over 30 minutes away, so I had to call property management immediately, asking them to unlock the newly rented storefront for me. It was conveniently located right near my parking garage, situated on the very edge of the compound. I parked my car in the underground lot. By the time I walked over to the storefront, a few minutes later, the trucks outside were frantically unloading. Seeing the supplies pile up like a mountain gave me an immense sense of security. Just then, a property staff member walked over, looking at me with extreme confusion. After all, no sane person would open a grocery store in a neighborhood with less than 10% occupancy. I briskly signed the lease agreement. Took's okay. And by then, the supermarket team had finished unloading. After everyone left, it was already 6:30 p.m. I drove my car back and forth, moving everything to the garage, then used a trolley, load by load, taking the elevator up to my apartment. Fortunately, in my entire building, I was currently the only resident living here. I noticed light drizzle beginning to fall from the sky. I pulled out my phone and checked. It was already 10:30 at night. Not daring to delay any longer, I sprinted straight home. Although property management knew I was an owner here, the contact info I left for the storefront lease was completely fake. By the time I got inside, the rain was getting heavier. I quickly grabbed the heavy-duty padlocks I had bought and locked down every stairwell fire door. From the 10th floor upwards, this way, even if someone tried to break through to my floor, they'd have to get through multiple heavy locks first. Then, I pulled out all my power stations and plugged them into charge. In my dream, this storm would completely paralyze the entire city's power grid. I felt incredibly when thankful. I first renovated this place, I planned to retire here. So, I spent a fortune upgrading the apartment's security systems to the max. Because of my job, I would often be away on business trips for half a month. So I had also installed a visual surveillance system at my door. By now, the rain was pouring violently, even though it was already a severe storm outside. The indoor temperature was still suffocatingly high. I had to blast the AC to the lowest setting possible, doing everything I could to ensure my food wouldn't spoil early from the heat. Then began hours of sorting and organizing. Mi stockpile. By the time I finished, it was already 3 a.m. My body was screaming with exhaustion, but my brain refused to sleep. I could only sit blankly by the window, staring out. The rainfall had visibly increased into a massive deluge, occasionally accompanied by jagged lightning tearing through the night. I didn't turn on any lights. The entire residential complex was practically pitch black. The distant city center looked as if it had been swallowed by a monster, completely invisible in the dark. Premier in bed, listening to the intensifying roar of the rain outside, and finally drifted into a restless sleep. The next day, I was jolted awake by a crack of thunder. I realized it was already broad daylight. Walking past the window on my way to the kitchen, I saw the rain pouring relentlessly. Dark, oppressive clouds hung dangerously low, accompanied by deafening thunder and lightning. I swiftly prepared my breakfast and took the opportunity to call my company, requesting sick leave, since I had just closed a massive 8 million yuan contract for them. My boss easily agreed to let me rest for a few days. With nothing to do, I simply curled up in bed, binge-watching shows and dozing off. Throughout the day, I swapped out the fully charged power stations. During the evening news, The city's meteorological observatory issued a yellow alert for rainstorms, reminding citizens to beware of flooded roads and to be safe on their commutes home. Online, many people were complaining, wondering why it had suddenly rained non-stop for 24 hours and how they were supposed to get to work tomorrow. I couldn't help but sigh. The disaster had already begun. Whether they would even survive was the real question. I opened the homeowners' WeChat group, watching everyone gripe about the inconveniences the storm was causing. I looked up at the torrential rain outside, deeply puzzled. Why was it only a yellow alert? Because I slept so late yesterday. I went to bed early today. In the middle of the night, a barrage of notification pings woke me up. It was the neighborhood group chat. A young mother was manually tagging everyone, saying her baby had a high fever. They had no medicine at home and begging anyone with meds to help her. Even though the occupancy here was extremely low, she was quite famous around here. Even I knew who this mother was. She was the secret mistress of some high-level executive. She had tried to use her child as a bargaining chip for status, but unexpectedly gave birth to a daughter instead, coming alone from another province. She was stashed here and didn't dare return to her hometown, forced to raise the child here by herself. When the executive's actual wife found out about her existence, she orchestrated a massive, mocking spectacle, sending a banner thanking her. Because of this drama, virtually everyone in the complex knew her scandalous backstory. She kept pleading in the chat for a long time. The majority of people simply ignored her. A few others made cynical, sarcastic remarks, like, "Are you having a fever too? Première Livalon. I have some at my place, come get it." I couldn't stop sighing. Did these people realize they might not even live to see tomorrow's sun? And that's why they were acting out their base desires. I looked up again. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to be pressing down even lower. Torrents of water, accompanied by thunder, slammed down relentlessly. I decided to go back to sleep. By the time I woke up, it was noon. While cooking lunch, I scrolled through my phone, finding that the government had upgraded the warning to a red alert for rainstorms. My work chat also sent out a mandatory suspension notice after replying received. I kept checking other news feeds. The people in the neighborhood group were starting to panic. A few residents, seeing it had rained for another full night, smartly took initiative, going out first thing in the morning to hoard supplies. These people were the lucky ones. They managed to grab some essential groceries in time. Those who went too late discovered that major supermarkets and wholesale markets were wiped clean almost overnight. Forget staples and vegetables. Even the unpopular junk food nobody usually buys was completely gone. I opened Douyin TikTok and saw many complaining that older residential areas, due to their low elevation, had already begun experiencing massive flooding on the ground levels. Only when they couldn't buy food did people realize how severe the situation was. The news reported Tatim Migazor was hitting their country shamelessly. In many low-lying areas, the street water levels had reached people's calves. Even opening the manhole covers did nothing to drain it. Numerous accidents had already occurred from people falling into unseen drains. The sirens of ambulances could be heard echoing throughout City A. Just in case prolonged rainstorms led to sudden emergencies. I divided my water and food into several large caches, placing them strategically in each room. I also, specifically, kept one stash where I could easily hide at a moment's notice. Today is the 7th consecutive day of the storm. City A's older districts gradually began to fall. The floodwaters fully submerged the first floors. Many residents on the lower levels, with nowhere else to go, started scrambling up the stairs. Most were forced to camp in the stairwells. A few found neighbors willing to take them in. But the lower floors of these old buildings were mostly occupied by the elderly. Slowly, the supply consumption accelerated, leading to multiple fierce conflicts. At first, community workers delivered rations door to door daily. But as time dragged on, manpower and resources were completely exhausted. No one was left to handle these crises. At this time, in my own complex's group chat, many owners were also complaining that they were entirely out of food. They bombarded the property management with tags asking why the rations promised for today still hadn't arrived. But the staff sent out to procure supplies had scoured the neighboring cities and wholesale markets and couldn't buy a single thing. Under immense pressure from the desperate residents, the property management suddenly remembered me. They announced in the chat. A week ago, a female owner rented a space, saying she was opening a mini-mart in our complex. She brought in a massive amount of stock. The address is at storefront X. Everyone can go there and see if they can buy some supplies. As soon as this was posted, the group chat exploded. What? That storefront is super close to my building. How did I not know we had a supermarket? Someone else chimed in. It's true. A few days ago I saw a supermarket delivery truck coming in to unload goods. Hearing this, people began frantically tagging it all. Which fairy godmother opened this store? Please, say something. I can pay top dollar. Money is no object. Any kind of food is fine. Hurry, I want to buy some too. I'm fainting from hunger here. At that moment, a chill shot from my feet up my head. I was endlessly grateful for my paranoia. When I contacted the property, I used a virtual corporate SIM card issued by my company. That very night, I had deactivated the card and tossed it inside the store, burying it deep beneath piles of cardboard and trash. Even if they broke the door down, it was impossible to find that tiny chip. I turned off my phone screen and looked up out the window. The rain was now falling in a solid, impenetrable sheet, showing absolutely no signs of stopping. Living on the 18th floor, looking down from my window, I could faintly make out the storefront below. I stepped up to the window, drew the curtains tight, and stood behind a tiny slit, peeking out. Silently, I checked my phone again. The owners in the group saw that the supermarket ferry wasn't answering. A few of them discussed it and decided to head to the store to check. Putting my phone down and waiting for about 10 minutes, Premier saw several dark silhouettes emerge on the road near the store. They quickly approached the storefront. It was two men and one woman, Seeing the door locked, pulled out prepared tool and violently smashed the door open. 10 minutes later, the group, who had gone in full of hope, walked out with grim, furious faces. They had rummaged through the cardboard boxes for ages, but didn't find a single bite to eat. After throwing a temper tantrum and smashing things, there was nothing else they could do. They had no choice but to walk back into the rain. Simultaneously, they aggressively interrogated property management in the chat. There's nothing in that store but trash. Empty box. Were there really any supplies? You should know exactly which owner it is, right? Pressured by the furious residents, the property staff immediately checked their database for the lease. Unfortunately, let alone a working phone number, even the name on the lease didn't exist in the owner registry. The residents waited for a response, seeing that property management couldn't provide a single useful detail. They demanded, besides collecting fees. What the hell are you good for? You don't even know who you rented your own commercial space to. An heure passed. The property management replied with another word in the group. Seeing the total silence, a few residents who lived near the management office braved the rain to demand answers, but there was no one left. The office had been completely abandoned. At this point, people couldn't hold back and started spewing profanities in the chat. Of course, there were also many begging for their lives. The management ran away. We have no food left. Haber cuánto oído? Does anyone have food? I have some water left. Please trade with me. We are completely out of supplies. Are we really going to starve to death in here? I was finally absolutely certain that they had found zero trace of my identity. I breathed a sigh of relief and securely put my phone away. Over the next few days, the rain showed no signs of weakening or stopping. Every day consisted of eating, sleeping, and eating, feeling the new fat accumulating on my stomach. I decisively dragged out the electric treadmill I had bought but never used. From then on, I made sure to work out for an hour every single day. On the 18th day of the storm, the second floors of the complex were fully submerged in water. As time dragged on, the number of people desperate to trade for food and medicine only grew. On the 23rd day of the rain, the light in my bedroom suddenly flickered and died. I went to the slit in my curtains and peered out. The complex was swallowed in total darkness. The faint outlines of buildings were visible. I knew clearly that the power grid had finally collapsed. Checking my phone, the signal was entirely dead too. Even though I had battery-powered lamps prepared, I was terrified that any leaking light would expose my position. I decided to only use them in completely blacked out conditions. On the 36th day of the storm, I distinctly remembered the rain briefly pausing in my dream. But, in reality, there was no pause at all. A sense of deep foreboding hovered in my mind. Sure enough, a far greater danger quietly approached, accompanied by a distant, approaching roar. I saw violent, churning flash floods rushing from the distance. Like a maddened behemoth, it came to devour and destroy everything in its path. Looking at the direction the water was surging from, it was the largest reservoir in City A. Et tu sauvé? The prolonged, torrential rain had caused the dam to collapse. My mind was racing with a million thoughts. Logique told me. I am at the highest elevation. My supplies are ample. Any scenario. I have my inflatable boat ready. And life buoys. I found my designated safe corner and braced myself. My body was trembling instinctively. Every second felt like a century. The churning waves of the flood slammed into our complex with deafening force. In un instant, the water leveth floor. From the residents trapped on the lower levels, waves of agonizing screams echoed out. Some managed to climb the stairs in time, fleeing to higher floors. What surprised me was that so many people had actually managed to survive until now. If the dam hadn't burst, perhaps they could have held on even longer. Seeing that the water level had stopped rising, I felt temporarily relieved. But what worried me the most right now was that the people displaced now from the flood, entirely homeless and driven insane by despair, would inevitably storm the upper levels. And my building was the tallest one in the entire complex. I immediately dug out the remaining heavy padlocks and without hesitation snapped them onto the fire doors in the stairwell. Juste au besaf, I patrolled every door and window in my apartment again. It was during this check that I noticed something. A faint flicker of light was coming from a 17th floor window in the opposite building. Because of the distance, even staring intently, I could only make out vague, shifting silhouettes. I hurried to grab my binoculars and focused on that 17th floor window again. As the image sharpened, oh my god, it sent shivers down my spine. Premier Sawament, pinning a woman down onto a chair. Holding a rope, he ruthlessly and skillfully tied her up. Suppressing the terror rising in my chest, I carefully inspected the window set up over there. I deduced that the man must have broken in through her front door. City A was completely without power. The elevators were dead iron boxes. To get up there, he had to have climbed the stairs. And here I was, having barricaded every stairwell door above the 14th floor, and slapped multiple heavy-duty locks on my own front door. There was no doubt. If a starving intruder climbed all the way up here and saw my barricades, they would cry tears of absolute despair, pulling my thoughts back. By the time I looked through the binoculars again, the light in that living room was gone. No silhouettes either. I had no idea what happened to that woman in the end. I spent the night consumed by anxiety. Today marks the 39th day of the rainstorm. So far, no one has made it up here to smash my door. At noon, while resting on the sofa, I suddenly noticed something. The force of the rain battering against the glass had weakened. I immediately went to the crack in the curtains, looking closely. Yes, the rain was finally slowing down. For the past month and a half, this was the only thing that brought me joy. To célébrer, I decided to treat myself to a luxury, cooking up a lavish feast for lunch. On the 42nd day of the storm, the rain completely stopped. The water level stabilized at the 8th floor, no longer rising. I could faintly hear the sounds of people cheering across the complex. Although I was also thrilled, I cautiously chose to remain hidden. 3 days later, I saw that the water had finally receded back to the ground floor. The thick mud covering the ground was exposed. along with debris left behind by the flood. A few more days passed. Through my binoculars, I spotted figures moving around the complex. It looked like a team systematically clearing the area. At that moment, one of them held up a megaphone and shouted, "We are the rescue team. Survivors, it is safe to come out and receive supplies." Since my stockpile at home was still substantial, I decided not to go outside just yet. But after careful thought, remembering what I saw on the 17th floor opposite me, I chose to make a trip downstairs. I found a police officer in the rescue team and told him everything I had witnessed. Returning home, I habitually picked up my phone and found that the signal had finally been restored. A month later, the story of what happened on that 17th floor became known. It turned out that after the dam collapsed, a man living on the lower floors had completely run out of food. Driven by sheer desperation to survive, he began scavenging upward, floor by floor. He managed to smash open the door to the 17th floor. The woman living there was a freelance writer. She rarely left her home under normal circumstances and had stored a massive amount of food and water. After the man ate and drank his fill in her apartment, he noticed her attractive figure. Unable to control his twisted desires, he dragged her into the bedroom and brutally forced himself on her. It wasn't until the rescue team breached the 17th floor apartment that the girl was finally saved. The man was immediately apprehended and taken away. Bisous police. Not long after that, thanks to the government's tireless efforts, water, power, and transportation systems returned to normal. Though hardships still exist in this post-disaster world, I will continue to cherish this life and keep my fate firmly in my own hands.